Brought to you by Atlassian, AI-powered collaboration software that makes the impossible possible.
Brought to you by Solidigm. A new era in AI requires a new paradigm of data storage. Learn more at storageforai.com.
I'm Josh Christensen, and this is Most Innovative Companies. Yaz is out sick today, but don't worry, you'll still hear her later on the show on the 2 segments we taped last week. But for the top of the show and keeping tabs later on, we've got Fast Company Associate Editor David Salazar filling in. Hey, David.
Hi, Josh.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for filling in.
Of course. I hope Yaz feels better very soon.
Did you poison her? Is this an understudy situation? Is this a smash situation?
Absolutely not.
Well, anyways, thanks for joining us again. So let's get into it. On today's episode, former editor of the Financial Times, Lionel Barber.
Well, Elon is Einstein, but he's wrong.
Fast Company Editor-in-Chief, Brendan Vaughan.
Certainly the billionaire impact on the American election this year was really significant.
And as always, keeping tabs.
Like you can see yourself on a beach, sipping a nutcracker, listening to Bad Bunny.
But first, here's the download. The news you need to know this week in the world of business and innovation.
There's a new LLM in the AI game, and it's got Silicon Valley and Wall Street shook. It is from DeepSeek. This is a Chinese tech startup who you probably haven't heard of until this past week. DeepSeek's R1 model is reportedly superior to the top-tier U.S. models like ChatGPT and Llama, despite costing less than $6 million to train and using mid-range chips. For context, U.S. tech companies have spent hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to train their models and used a ton of very expensive chips. Why does this matter? It means that the barrier to entry to compete in the AI market just got much lower. Mark Andreessen called the DeepSeek R1 release AI's Sputnik moment.
My favorite part about this story is that they keep calling the chips mid. I keep seeing every news report being like mid-range chips. It's like some mid chips they were using. It's like Tostitos. It's pretty mid chip.
Very mid, like wrap snacks. Actually, wrap snacks are good. But
Utz is, I think, a mid chip.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a whole plot line in Mad Men about Utz, but we don't have to get into that.
Well, chip jokes aside, DeepSeek's debut did more than garner comparisons to the Cold War. The tech-heavy NASDAQ shed a total of $1 trillion from its market cap on Monday as investors reacted to the news. This was largely driven by NVIDIA, whose stock dropped 17%. It did, along with the rest of the NASDAQ, recover some of those losses, though, as of recording this.
The price of eggs has more than doubled since the summer of 2023 and could rise another 20%, according to the Department of Agriculture. The primary cause is the bird flu outbreak that's forcing farmers to slaughter millions of chickens each month. The virus outbreak is also putting pressure on the prices of turkey and milk and leading a lot of people to look for egg alternatives in baking.
I feel for restaurants and bakeries who are ordering hundreds and hundreds of eggs a day. I mean, the price to those bottom lines is going way up.
It's at least doubled, if not tripled, for a lot of restaurants. I follow a restaurant in Bed-Stuy who very transparently posted, like, we used to pay like $20 for several dozen eggs, and now it's $80 to $100. Crazy.
On the flip side, good news for the chickpea industry. Aquafaba is going way up.
You know what? Actually, I'm sorry, this is very digressive, but I follow King Arthur Baking.
Yeah.
And they posted sort of an experiment of egg replacement, and what appeared to work best, seltzer.
Seltzer?
In baking, yeah. Seems to do the trick.
Well, justice for the egg cream. Workers at a Philadelphia Whole Foods voted to unionize on Monday. This is the first successful unionization effort for workers at one of Amazon's grocery businesses. A reminder that Amazon purchased Whole Foods back in 2017 for roughly $13 billion. This is just the latest in a number of union efforts among Amazon workers. Just before Christmas, delivery drivers in a handful of U.S. cities went on strike.
The Trump administration has rescinded its order to freeze federal funding after widespread confusion, chaos, and legal challenges. The order, which came out on Monday, provided little detail on the scope of the freeze and caused disruption to a number of federal programs, including Medicaid. The White House spent Tuesday trying to clarify what the order applied to, and then just called the whole thing off on Wednesday.
And finally, a couple of high-profile earnings reports. On Tuesday, General Motors announced a fourth-quarter loss of $2.9 billion. Margin for error for GM will only get narrower with Trump's promise of a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico. And in the tech world, Meta's fourth-quarter sales jumped 21% year-over-year, while net income grew 49% to $20.8 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, in a call to investors, said, quote, "We now have a U.S. administration that is proud of our leading companies, prioritizes American technology winning, and that will defend our values and interests abroad." He said this in regards to earnings made when Joe Biden was still president. And that's the news you need to know today. David.
Yes, Josh.
If you were a billionaire, would you go to Davos and what would you wear?
If I were a billionaire, I would want nothing to do with, well, frankly, myself, but certainly not the crowd of billionaires at Davos.
Come on, you don't want to schmooze with a bunch of anonymous, super rich people from various industries?
No, the thing about having $1 billion is that it kind of permits you to not engage with whoever you don't want to engage with.
That's true. Yeah.
But, okay, I'll engage if I were to go to Davos and hang out with other billionaires, it would certainly be in probably like Tom Ford couture. Like I would have custom-made suits for the event.
If I was that rich, I would go all out with like what my clothing was at all times in the most inappropriate situations.
Actually, yeah, you know what? There's this really cool Spanish designer named Victor Barragan, and he sort of makes intentionally like trashy stuff, and maybe I would commission him to make my Davos outfits.
I would take my inspiration from Bronwyn Newport from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Her fashion game is so campy, so fun. All of her looks are great. I would take a cue from Bronwyn. Well, we're talking about Davos later in the show with Brendan Vaughan, Fast Company's editor-in-chief. But first, we're talking about Softbank. Last week, President Donald Trump announced a joint venture with OpenAI, Oracle, and Softbank to invest billions of dollars in AI infrastructure in the U.S. The project is called Stargate, and Softbank CEO Masayoshi Son will be its chairman. To get a deeper understanding of Masa Son and Softbank, Yaz interviewed former editor of the Financial Times, Lionel Barber, who wrote a new book called Gambling Man: The Wild Ride of Japan's Masayoshi Son. They got into Son's family life, Softbank's successes like ARM, and failures like WeWork. But Yaz had to start the conversation by asking Lionel about the Stargate deal. Yaz asked him if he saw this deal coming and what he thought of Elon Musk's assertion that Masa didn't have the money to pull this off.
Lionel Barber, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Before we get to the book, we have to talk about the Stargate deal.
We do.
Which you told me before this, the day the book came out, the deal was announced. What did you think of the deal? Did you see it coming? And what do you think of Elon's response?
Well, Elon is Einstein, but he's wrong. The fact is, Masa does have the money, or a lot of the money. And by the way, we are talking $500 billion over 4 years. That's what he's talked about. Look, he's got $40 billion on the balance sheet, cash. He's got some assets that he could sell. You know, he's got stakes in T-Mobile. He's got stakes in 500 companies, and he's also got partners like Sam Altman of OpenAI and Larry Ellison, who's worth, what, $200 billion?
Yep.
So I think he's going to have some debt in there as well, by the way. I don't know what percentage exactly, maybe half, maybe 40%. So he's well on the way to $500 billion, and it's real.
I know that there's been a lot of talk about an Elon-Sam Altman rivalry. Does Elon Musk have any relationship with Masa?
No, he doesn't. But they did have a meeting around 2017-ish, where they essentially, Elon is thinking about going private. And Masa sees an opportunity, as he often does, and they did have talks. But I think what happened, as so often is the case when it comes to multi-billionaires, there was a bit of an ego clash, as well as a discussion about terms.
Yeah. I know Masa is a billionaire. Is Trump a billionaire? Maybe. But they both have an ego. And I'm curious whether you watched the press conference at Mar-a-Lago where Trump asked Masa to double the investment announced. What did you think of that?
Yeah, he asked him to double the $100 billion dollars that he had pledged. And by the way, this is a mirror image of the meeting that Masayoshi Son had with President-elect Donald Trump in Trump Tower in December 2016, where it's a pretty short meeting, but Masa promises $50 billion and 50,000 jobs. So Mar-a-Lago, 8 years later, it's $100 billion and 100,000 jobs. Funny how those numbers round up. What I thought was, is it real? And can he attain those sums? So I did a little bit of research, and the answer is they think they can make up those numbers. Did they get to 50,000? Well, 50,000 for a time, and then, of course, there were layoffs during the COVID dump. So overall, two egos, watching them, I mean, Trump was trying it on, as Masa occasionally tries it on. You know, are you good for 200 billion? I mean, Masa will normally say, I'm good for anything. But I think even he thought 200 billion at that point was a stretch.
And you've got a great story about Trump and Masa in the book about Trump asking Masa to comb his hair.
Yes. Well, they had this meeting where Trump hears that Masa is ready to create 50,000 jobs and invest $50 billion in the U.S. economy. And so he's already wants to tweet this out in real time. And the meeting doesn't last very long. Trump retires to his bathroom and straightens his tie and then combs his hair in a particular meticulous fashion. And then he looks at Masa and says, you know, look, it's the kind of little things that matter. So this is the way to comb your hair. Forgetting, of course, that Masa is, shall we say, follically challenged. He doesn't have a lot of hair. So there is that real moment of surreal.
Yeah.
Billionaire meets billionaire, one with more hair than the other.
Did you get a sense of what the two men think of each other at all?
Oh, I think they're both very transactional. That's an overused term, but both of them are deal makers, natural deal makers, always looking to gain the edge. And I think, therefore, there's a sort of meeting of minds. And Masa, you know, he's very good at spotting where there's a likely convergence of interest. So for Masa to get close to Trump, back in 2016, it was, I want to merge Sprint with T-Mobile. I'm being blocked by those Obama administration people, so maybe I'm going to get a better deal. And now with Trump 2.0, it's like every billionaire in America right now, they want to get close to Trump because he is the man.
Now, to go back to the book, what was it like to report this story? I mean, were people really down to talk to you? You know, Son is notoriously difficult to physically pin down, but you did manage to speak to him a few times.
Well, let's start with Masayoshi Son. He is a very secretive, private man. He's very difficult to get to. His travel schedule is always up in the air. He sort of makes it up as he goes along. And he was extremely difficult to get to. So essentially, I decided to do a lot of reporting first before really asking for the interview. And I did go to Tokyo twice and was told he was too busy. I think the first time, to be fair, he was coming out of COVID and Japan had been locked down a long time, so he was a bit busy. I think he was also plotting Stargate, by the way, but we can come to that. So I decided to leverage my contacts, particularly in America, and go to Silicon Valley, go to Stanford Business School, learn a bit more about venture capital, and work those contacts, see Bill Gates, go to the Sun Valley conference and Allen and Company conference, where there were a lot of people there who knew Masa. So I had quite a bit of reporting before going there. I think the second big obstacle was cultural. I don't speak Japanese. Getting to get Japanese people to talk is not easy. So you needed introductions. And I had then found a researcher who was Korean Japanese, which was very important for helping me understand both the language, translating Japanese manuscripts, texts. And then the third obvious problem was you need quite a lot of money to travel around the world.
That's what I was wondering how big your book deal was.
Not big enough to cover the travel budget, I can tell you. But look, I figured it was going to be an investment and, you know, I needed something to do. What do you do after being editor of the Financial Times for more than 14 years? answer, get a project.
You know, in the book, I think you have a really good explanation for why Son is so interesting. You know, you essentially say he's not a creator, he's a deal maker. He came from nothing, but also built everything without backing of VCs, for instance. Did you pitch the book that way? Did you think of it as a write-around if he wouldn't participate?
No. So first of all, we need to probably start with where he started.
Yeah.
Because it is quite an extraordinary story. And his father left school at 14. It's after the Second World War. Japan is devastated. And he's, selling liquor illegally in a slum, Korean-Japanese slum in Kyushu, the Western Island in Japan. Then he goes into pig breeding, which is a quite lucrative business in post-war Japan.
And Son has a dream about waking up and smelling
That's right.
pigs later on.
And pigs' excrement and stuff, because he did spend about 4 years growing up in the margins or in the slum. So he remembers that, and it sort of scarred him, I think. I mean, I don't think that's an exaggeration. And then his father goes into loan sharking, and then, of course, pachinko, which is the slot machine gambling, which is really part of the underworld economy in Japan. So he comes from that slightly dark side, and Masa, growing up, sees the hustler. He's got a hustling instinct. But then he does a crucial thing, which is to leave Japan age 16 and go to America. And he spends 7 years being educated at high school and then college at Berkeley and goes back to Japan. So I think he's the outsider who speaks English. He can be the middleman. All these things he marshals to make it as an entrepreneur in Japan. And he's a self-starter. Look, he began with nothing. He created a software distribution business, then became this multi-billionaire kind of Forrest Gump character who's around every time there's a sort of big tech transformation. He's there.
You go into detail at the beginning of the book about the sort of level of discrimination Koreans in Japan experienced. And you also mention later on that many in Japan had an almost dismissive view of Son, even though he was rich. Where does that come from? But also, is that still the case today?
I think Son is an object of suspicion still in corporate Japan and envy, because he is the richest man in Japan alongside the fast retailing Uniqlo, Mr. Tadashi Yanai.
Yeah.
And Yanai, by the way, was on his board, Softbank board for nearly 20 years. So he's also an object of suspicion because he doesn't actually make anything. He's not a steel maker. He's not a car maker. He's this sort of financial engineer stroke middleman. And that's why he's looked at, a suspicious person. But also, he's Korean Japanese. And as you say, they were long-time non-people, sub-citizens. Korea was part of the Imperial Japan, part of the colonial empire, the turn of the century. And, the fact is, there is still endemic prejudice by Japanese against Koreans.
My favorite parts of this book, and it's called Gambling Man, so I knew this was going to happen, but there are two stories. One is when Ron Fisher attended a SoftBank company event and Masa asked people to come up with ways to meet a pretty outlandish, I think it's $300 million profit goal. The second is when he's talking to Jerry Yang, co-founder of Yahoo, offers him $100 million. Yang says no, and he says everybody needs $100 million. Tell me about Masa's sort of desire to make these kind of humongous investments or bets or predictions.
I think that he is a master of destabilization as a negotiating tactic. So you kind of come up with a huge number, and then if you don't accept it on the other side, he says, well, you take it or I'll kill you. That's what he said to Jerry Yang.
Yeah.
He said, first of all, everybody needs 100 million, but then he says, if you don't take it, what's your greatest competitor? Oh, Excite. Right, we'll put the money there. So he does that. He also does it, I think, and, one of my favorite moments is when he's trying to hire Nikesh Arora, the Google man, and they're negotiating the contract and the money, the remuneration package on a napkin. And he puts these huge numbers with zeros. That's what he does. It's the theatrical flourish. It's real. It's unusual. And then lastly, I'm going to be bigger than you ever imagined. And I'm going to say things that are so outrageous that you kind of almost feel I'm going to miss out. The fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And he plays on that. And he did it obviously very effectively when he was raising billions, tens of billions in the Gulf. And he got the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, to hand over $45 billion. By the way, it wasn't 45 minutes. There was a meeting which lasted 45 minutes, but there'd been a lot of groundwork done before that. So he can exaggerate a little.
Yeah, he's got some, sense of drama.
Definitely.
That I think is very funny. And speaking of that, you said at one point, the thing that he doesn't have in common with maybe some other people in the Valley is that he is a nerd like them, but he's also extroverted. And every story about him just seems insane to me. But I'm curious what he was like on a personal level when you interviewed him.
Much quieter and less theatrical, much more reflective. I think he really wanted me to understand or try and appreciate him as a historical figure, first of all. I mean, he has a great deep sense of history. I mean, he compares himself as an empire builder to Napoleon and Genghis Khan and Emperor Qin, who built the Great Wall of China. I mean, this is the kind of scale and context that he thinks about. He was much more reflective and also a slightly sad character. I mean, I interviewed him in 2023. I did 4 interviews in Tokyo. One was by Zoom because I went to Tokyo and suddenly was too busy again. So I said, okay, we got 2 more interviews. One of them was by Zoom. Otherwise, I'm going to die of jet lag. But I thought, this is a man who never is quite fulfilled. Mm-hmm. He's a bit like, I describe him not as Icarus, overreaching, but more like Sisyphus pushing this boulder up the hill. And then it's somehow always incomplete. So I think this is why this next act, the AI act, is so important for him.
He also operates on what seems to me totally insane time horizons. He's claimed that he's going to live to 120.
120.
It's 120, yeah. And he's making predictions, 300 years from now. How much of that is bluster and how much of that is just truly the way he thinks in terms of history at all times?
It has more than an element of seriousness to it, because what he's kind of trying to convey to investors and his workforce is that we have to think about the future, but much more, not next week, not next hour, not next year, but a longer term perspective. Now, when you hear 300 years, you and I kind of go, what?
Yeah.
But as I explain in the book, some Japanese companies, they literally do go back several hundred years. Mm-hmm. There's a liquor company and sake company, which...
although technology evolves at a much faster pace than sake, right?
So he's trying to say, I'm not a short-term investor. I'm somebody who thinks in much longer time frame. Now, on the plus side, you could say he understood, and that's his great kind of insight, was to understand that the sweep of technology and technological innovation that we've seen since the launch of the microchip, I mean, this has been a consistent, exponential technological progress, and he's ridden that wave. On the other hand, when you look at some of his trading, I mean, this is not exactly 300-year stuff. I mean, he clearly traded out of NVIDIA stock.
Yeah,
missed out big
absolutely
time
at the wrong time. Yep.
2019, but he's kept Alibaba stock all that time and turned a $100 million bet into 120 billion, whatever you want to say. It's a great bet. But sometimes he does get very short-term in and out of stocks and stuff.
Speaking of Alibaba, at one point you report him saying that Jack Ma had this animal smell. And I know, there's that famous meeting with Adam Neumann where he asked him, in a fight, who wins, the smart or the crazy guy? Tell me about the kinds of entrepreneurs that Son finds himself attracted to.
Well, he definitely likes visionaries, people who think big, very big. Adam Neumann obviously thought he could create the biggest real estate leasing business with a, high-tech kind of smattering in the world. So he likes that, people who think very, very big. And I describe in the book how I think he's susceptible to founder syndrome. So people who talk big like he does, he's a bit of a sucker for that. On the other hand, if you think of great visionaries, and we come back to someone who we can't fail to talk about these days in America, Elon Musk. I mean, Musk talks about a mission to go to Mars. It's real, it feels real. SpaceX and also Starlink. These are huge visionary projects, and you need to do that if you're going to be a great person. I think the difference with Masa is, so Masa is attracted to that.
Mm-hmm.
He's a builder.
Yeah.
And he's an empire builder. He thinks on a grand scale. And that's what puts him in a special category. And it's why he elevates people who think and talk the same language. Obviously, sometimes you're going to miss out badly.
At the same time, you describe him as, you say Son's enthusiasms were fleeting and his relationships transactional. In terms of his actual employees, say how Nikesh Arora and his relationship deteriorated, who are the employees he wants to hire within SoftBank?
Well, first of all, you need to draw a distinction between people that he's invested in and the founders. I think he puts them in a different category. But with people around him, I think there is a bit of a kind of he's married one day and divorced the next. Or maybe, in a short period of time. And clearly succession is still an issue. What happens to SoftBank when he goes? He did line up Nikesh Arora as a potential successor from Google, paid him a lot of money. I mean, who wouldn't like $320 million guaranteed over 4 years? Nikesh lasted shorter time than that, maybe 2.5 years. But I think, again, you have to distinguish between people who I describe, and they mustn't take offense, as mercenaries, people who are hired guns. You could argue that Rajiv Misra, the ex-Deutsche banker who ran the SoftBank Vision Fund, comes into that category. Marcelo Clary, very effective executive who ran Sprint, did a very good job, but he also fell in that category, worked for him for about sort of 7 years. Then they leave. But then there's this loyal cadre of people in Japan, the Japanese executives, who, by the way, are a lot less well paid than these grand mercenaries. They've stayed loyal. And that's probably something about the Japanese corporate psyche. So I put them in a different category.
Yeah, in the book you sort of say people think about having a job for life in that country, which seems pretty different to how we think about things here. What can you say about his current succession plan? Do you have any idea?
So, succession. He was asked about that, and he said, well, I don't have any sons. And the executive looked at him and thought to himself, well, you do have 2 daughters.
Yeah.
So that tells you something.
Yeah.
It's not going to be in the family. I think Masa is desperate to make his latest bets around AI and this whole Stargate venture a huge success, and that's what he's focused on. He is not focused on retiring. He did have, and he makes a great deal of this from when he was a student in America, drawing up this sort of 6-decade life plan, and that around the age of 60 he would step away. And he clearly just said, no, life's too interesting. So I think he's carried out on a box. And what happens to SoftBank? I mean, the question then is, does it get broken up? Because it's, he's got this holding company, he's got SoftBank Mobile, he owns ARM, the very special advanced semiconductor design company based in Cambridge, England, paid $30 billion of that. It's probably worth $140 billion now. All these could be a breakup situation. And if you remember, also it's worth pointing out that SoftBank's market cap is still less than the agglomerated parts.
One relationship that comes up a couple times in the book is his relationship with Steve Jobs. And I love the story where he presented a sort of rudimentary drawing of a phone and an iPod combined effectively. What was their relationship like? And do you think Masa views himself as like a Steve Jobs type figure?
He'd love to be seen as a Steve Jobs type figure, but he kind of knows that he didn't have the design brilliance of Steve Jobs. Although he's a master of many matters technology, in terms of technology. I mean, Steve Jobs just combined everything from the aesthetic to the high computing in these products like the iPhone and the iPad and iPod. But Masa did have a close relationship with Steve Jobs. He met Steve Jobs in the mid-'80s at the Comdex Trade Fair, which he later bought, by the way, from Sheldon Adelson, the Las Vegas billionaire. But he really got to know Jobs after Larry Ellison threw a dinner party, and he got talking with Steve Jobs. I'm told that was the key thing, and that was about 97, and they kept in touch. And then Masa bought or wanted to buy a mobile phone company and set up a mobile phone business in Japan. He wanted to buy Vodafone Japan. He thought about starting his own, so he needed a product. And then he kind of was toying around with something like a mobile phone, like the iPhone. And he presented this rudimentary drawing to Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs looked at it and said, I don't need your shitty drawing. Technical term, by the way. And then
didn't he
Masa
say,
said,
I have my
want it.
own?
Yeah, I've got my own
You know.
project. And then Masa tried to find out about it. Steve Jobs wouldn't tell him. And then according to Masa, and I think there's a little bit of literary license here,
Yeah.
he basically says Steve Jobs promised him exclusive distribution of the iPhone product in Japan, which of course was a game changer for SoftBank. When you've just bought Vodafone Japan, the biggest leverage buyout in Asia at the time, and you need a product. And he had the iPhone. He had exclusive distribution for about 3 years.
And Vodafone was sort of a secondary player.
Vodafone Japan was a complete second rate, also ran, and the only thing it had going for it, do you know what?
No.
It had a marketing campaign led by, wait for it, David Beckham.
That's funny. That was good.
Oh, yeah.
I want to come back to AI a little bit. When did he first get interested in it?
I think around the turn of the century. I can't establish whether he actually read Ray Kurzweil's book about the singularity of the moment when machines become more intelligent than human beings. But I certainly know he heard about it. He's not a great book reader, by the way.
Oh, really?
He did read a lot of history and literature when he was at college and at high school and stuff. But now he's not a great book reader.
Well, iRobot came out at the turn of the century. That's how I learned about AI. Will Smith vehicle iRobot.
Right. Well, I think that was it. And then he also became very interested in acquiring ARM, the advanced semiconductor designer. And so he was talking about AI. You see articles appearing kind of 99, 2001 to... The fascinating thing is, although he talked about it and talked about the singularity, he doesn't actually invest in a serious way and systematic way in deep AI for quite some time. And he kind of misses Sam Altman's OpenAI. And I think that was partly because of the distraction of the Vision Fund. When he had $100 billion or $98.6 billion to spend, and it was all done in a rush and it wasn't very systematic. And so he lost a bit of focus. I think it's now he's laser-like on it.
Well, he invested in, I think you call it in the book, sort of AI phase 1 companies like ByteDance and Didi, and now he's focused on phase
Definitely.
2 companies?
Yeah, and all he talks about is AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, or ASI, Artificial Superintelligence. And I think you have to take this more seriously now. I think he really is looking for opportunities. He's invested a lot in the robotics area, and he's talking about really investing in the infrastructure around artificial intelligence, which means energy and large language models training.
When he makes those investments, and I'm comparing them to, say, when he made his Vision Fund investments, do you think he's trying to take those companies public, or do you think he's got a sort of different idea of how things are going to come together?
I'm going to do a White House press corps answer to that. I'm going to say, great question. I think that there is a little bit of a difference. He obviously had this, what I call the battery hen operation approach to business, where he essentially invests in something and it's in a conveyor belt.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then, and he talks about laying golden eggs and, it's essentially a conveyor belt to an IPO. But given the fact that the IPO market has been pretty lackluster.
Although ARM went very well for him.
ARM is the exception to the rule. That is absolutely correct. And he's got 90% of that. and it's been a great investment. But the IPO market in general has been flat. So I think what he's really looking at is trying to link investment in companies that are in the deep AI space. He's got energy assets, SoftBank Energy, solar, etc. And he's got the kind of design expertise with ARM. And I think he is serious about developing a super chip to rival NVIDIA's. And so all these things are putting together in the same way that he invested in what might be termed, and other people talk about, the picks and shovels in the internet ecosystem and infrastructure. That's what he's trying to do in AI.
So predictions time. Stargate was just announced. A, what's the future of that? B, what else are we going to see in the next?
Stargate, it's real. I think you've only seen chapter 1 in maybe a 4-act drama, or act 1, 4 acts. I think that he does have a lot more money. He hasn't got the whole 500, whatever his stake is, because remember, he's got partners, including Sam Altman. But I think that's going to be teased out more. We're going to see more detail about the energy side. How's he going to do that? Who's he with? And we're going to see more about the super chip. We're going to hear a lot more about ARM and its role, its absolutely central role in this venture, because it's got the design expertise. And then I think you'll hear a bit more about the portfolio. He may sell, by the way. He's got stakes in 500 companies. I think he's going to sell down to raise cash, partly for this. And then you may see some IPO business. And overall, I predict we'll have the rehabilitation of Masayoshi Son, the man that everybody was willing to write off in 2021-22.
And this will be his 5th?
Yeah, I reckon
time?
5th comeback from the dead. I mean, you have to remember there were people telling me in 2022, you need to get this book written in 6 months.
Because no one will care,
No one will care, or he's going to be finished.
Yep.
And that put a lot of stress on me. I was thinking, oh my God, but I wasn't ready. And fortunately, I talked to 1 or 2 people who said, you know what? This is a man who knows the art of war, Sun Tzu. He's actually biding his time and hiding his strength and plotting the greatest comeback since Lazarus.
Done it. All right. I think that's an amazing place to end the interview. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
It's a great pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
G'day, we're Atlassian. We make team collaboration software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, which power enterprise businesses around the world, including 83% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian, you'll unlock AI-powered teamwork, which means more time doing the work that matters. In fact, our customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. So you'll have more time to listen to podcasts. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. That's Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
An outdated approach to data infrastructure could be the thing that holds back a company's AI ambitions. The new era of AI requires a new approach to data storage. From the highest capacities to the highest performance, Solidigm solid-state storage solutions are optimized to meet the complex data demands at each stage of the AI data pipeline, all with a smaller footprint and incredible energy efficiency. Learn how Solidigm can help businesses achieve their AI ambitions at storageforai.com.
Last week, in addition to the inauguration, it was the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, otherwise known as Davos. This year's theme was collaboration for the intelligent age. So discussing topics from the promise and risk of AI to climate change to wealth inequality. But the main driver of conversation was the newly inaugurated U.S. President, Donald Trump. So Fast Company's editor-in-chief, Brendan Vaughan, was actually at Davos last week, and Yas and I gave him a call while he was there to get a sense of the vibes and what was being discussed.
Davos happened at a crazy time this year because It was during
literally the week of inauguration.
That's the
Trump's
word I
second
was
term.
searching for.
Yeah.
What was the vibe?
Well, so Monday, January 20th was both inauguration day and the first day of Davos. It was also the day that I missed my connection from Amsterdam to Zurich and spent Monday in the Amsterdam airport. So I wasn't here for that actual day. The event hasn't really started anyway until Tuesday. Yeah, I mean, it changed a little bit today. We can get into it how so, but yesterday was really, really dominated by Trump, by the start of this, not just new administration, but a sense here that this is kind of a new world order, potentially, that, this is a really, really, really significant change. Everybody obviously knows what Donald Trump is all about in a way that they didn't last time, and can tell how determined he is to use what he learned in his first term, mistakes he made, especially in the beginning of his first term, in terms of the kinds of people who he wanted to work with, how quickly he wanted to move, how he wanted to use his power. So there's a lot of talk and buzz and speculation and theorizing everywhere you go here as people process this. There's so many different facets of it. There's the
tariffs, which I feel like people can't stop talking about at Davos based off coverage.
And that's actually the one area where I would say, I mean, it's hard to say like the business community feels a certain way. It's not a totally monolithic thing, but certainly businesses tend to like less regulation, a more hospitable environment for M&A, a lot of things that were not really the case under Biden and that are clearly going to be the case under Trump. So by and large, there's a lot of alignment. There's a great deal of alignment between what a lot of CEOs want and what they feel is going to happen in this administration. There's probably no greater example and more just like obvious example of that than all of the tech CEOs who are not, as far as I know. I didn't check today to see if anybody arrived, but many of those guys that were at the inauguration sitting in prime seats would have been in Davos and weren't because they wanted to be there. So that's different about this year. And so the last thing I'd say, I guess, is just Europe. This is Europe, obviously. And so the European attitude about this is distinct. I mean, it's different from the American attitude. It has commonalities, but it has differences too. And I think that one aspect of that kind of within the broader sort of Trump reaction is just AI regulation, which Trump clearly does not seem to do a whole heck of a lot of that. And Europe has always been much more aggressive about wanting to regulate AI and be sort of cautious about AI than the US.
That makes a lot of sense. In terms of speakers, I was looking through, and one that struck me was Jamie Dimon talking about hugging it out with Elon and telling people to get over it when it comes to tariffs. I'm curious whether you've seen, either from the speakers or from people you've spoken to, people have had kind of unexpected positions when it comes to the election. Do you see a lot of about faces compared to last time?
The whole entire vibe of the reaction is in many ways an about face. I mean, it's almost hard to remember, but, there was not a lot of, I mean, to keep saying the business community, I mean, they were not big fans of Donald Trump in 2016. And like many Republicans who weren't MAGA Republicans were skeptical and didn't know what to make of it and weren't like coming out to sort of congratulate him and kiss the ring when he won. There's just been this sort of normalization. I say that with no judgment or editorializing, but it's just become like a much more accepted normal thing that this is the president and a lot of his policies are going to be good for our business. And whether we really like him and actually think he's a great American or not, or we are just okay with how much more okay it has become to, if not express support, then to certainly express acceptance and, in some cases, full-on admiration. And there's certain tech leaders, we all know their names, who have been very clear about being supporters. There's a lot of others that are just kind of cool with it and are happy with the regulatory environment and the kind of AI environment that is going to exist under Trump.
Yeah, that does feel more in line with just how this community normally reacts to any president. I mean, it sort of makes sense. Like the president of the United States can hold major sway or have major effect on your businesses. And you, for lack of a better term, like you kind of want to suck up to the president a little bit. It's why businesses donate to both sides quite often. And so normalization seems like the right word.
Right.
Another focus that, I'll be honest, was really funny to me is People keep worrying about billionaires and the influence they're having on global public affairs. And this is a summit of billionaires, so I always find it funny when people show up and pontificate.
Right.
But I am curious what you've seen on the ground.
It feels like that I Think You Should Leave sketch by Tim Robinson where he's
dressed as a hot
dog.
Yeah.
That's kind of what Davos feels like when they talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
Like the carbon emissions a few years ago got a lot of play on TikTok of everyone showing up in their private planes and then talking about climate change.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's undeniable that it is fairly ridiculous to collect, I don't even know how many billionaires in one place and then listen to them talk about climate change and saving the planet after flying in on their PJs from all around the world, So, a lot of people have made that observation. It's undeniable. This isn't new, right? I mean, so the number of billionaires is more, but the dynamic there is sort of as it's always been. Again, I don't say that because I'm dismissive of it or don't think it's a serious critique. I actually do think it's a serious critique, but it's also, there's absolutely nothing new about this Davos that's happening.
I suppose capital I influence of billionaires in our election seems to have changed quite a bit. At least they're more public facing about it than they previously were. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think that is fair to say. And that's a good point. Certainly the billionaire impact on the American election this year was really significant. There certainly was a more out front impact that billionaires, chiefly Elon Musk, but others as well, who really, really put every amount of weight they could on the levers to influence the outcome.
I am curious whether people came in with more swag this year. You know what I mean? Just hey, I rule the world.
I think that mostly showed up in
Davos.
The shoe wear.
Yeah,
right?
the shoe wear. Yeah, the fashion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of anonymous rich people with really nice shoes here. I don't know how many of them are billionaires. I can't say that I recognized the majority of them, but another thing that's pretty typical here, but it's an impressive array of really, really nice boots on these mountains.
Yeah. I am sad, because everybody wears parka, there's not remember when swole Jeff Bezos came out at Sun Valley a while ago and it was oh my God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't really see that kind of transformation.
Right.
In the snow.
No. Although I have to say, it hasn't been that cold. It's been way colder in New York and most of the entire eastern United States.
Classic.
And probably a lot of the northern part of the United States too. It's been 40 here every day. It's been actually kind of gorgeous. And as I understand it, it's been 1 in New York. So
yeah, it's not.
That's correct.
It's not great.
If you really wanted to, you could probably show off your swole in this weather.
You brought up artificial intelligence a little bit earlier. We had, yesterday when we're recording this, the Trump administration announced a up to $500 billion investment in AI infrastructure it was a joint venture called Stargate that included OpenAI, Oracle, MGX, and most notably Softbank, who I think they kind of teased this a few weeks ago as well. This was quickly followed up by Elon Musk going on X saying they don't have the money and basically saying this isn't going to happen in any sort of way. What has the conversation been like around that?
That's interesting. I actually have been super busy today doing meetings and I had not seen that news about Elon saying that.
Oh, yeah. He said they don't have the money. Then Sam Altman replied with, I genuinely think you're one of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time. And it was Sam.
He said that to Elon in response to Elon saying you don't have the money?
That's correct.
That's a curious
I wonder
response.
how much of this is just part of the ongoing Sam Altman, Elon Musk feud. That seems to be a weird thing, but it seems like Sam Altman's trying to cool things. Yeah, Elon popped on X and poo-pooed all over the deal.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know about that. It just seems to me, this is my opinion, I don't have any access to what the Trump administration's strategy is around this, but I mean, it seems fairly obvious that Trump has looked at the impact of AI on the stock market in the last period of time, which has been extraordinary, and is why would I do anything that would slow that down? There is so much value being created by NVIDIA, all the tech companies that have just been completely powering the market disproportionately and accounting for a massive percentage of the value that has grown in the last couple of years. And so much of it is AI. I mean, the overwhelming majority of it is being pushed up by investors' belief that in the transformative value creation potential of AI for these companies. And so I think Trump wants more than anything to have a stock market that is sky high for as much of his second 4-year term as possible. And he's just kind of all in on this. And he's all in on so many things that he hated. He hated TikTok. Now he saves TikTok. He called crypto, like, I forget what it was. It was like, it's just made up out of thin air or something like that. And now he has his own meme coin. I mean,
Brendan, are you insinuating that our president is inconsistent in his beliefs?
I am saying it straight up. I should also say that it could change as fast as it's changed this time, and it is impossible to predict. It is a real fool's errand to try to say, like, how long any of this is going to last, how long Elon will be welcome in Mar-a-Lago, how long anything that currently is the case is the case. So, we're back. Here we are again. It's Donald Trump's America again. And just, buckle in.
To quote Byron Daniels, an elected official, daddy's home.
No.
It's a serious thing.
So upset by that.
That he said about Trump.
I am curious, when you think about either the deal making or the pitches that people are making when it comes to AI technology, obviously everybody has to have that disclaimer line that's like, AI without control is bad, but there's also a lot of opportunities here. Do you think people are less risk averse than before? You know what I mean? Are people still bringing up the dangers of AI continually, or is this really like a forum where everybody's just trying to wheel and deal and tout their latest AI product?
I mean, some people are definitely talk a lot about the dangers of AI. I think they have a hard time competing with the kind of overwhelming momentum of the gold rush, whatever you want to call it, the sort of AI moment that we're in. So yeah, they exist. I mean, I mentioned earlier, a lot of Europeans express these views. People like Tristan Harris, the American technology ethicist, is nuanced. There are nuanced people out there who are beating this drum, but the tech utopian crowd and they like kind of get on the train or get left behind, that impulse is just really, really strong. And one argument that you hear that I find to be a compelling argument, not saying that I necessarily agree with it, but that I find it to be a difficult to refute argument, which is that, and this is kind of the corporate American, like, nationalist argument to not slow down, which is that if we do, someone else just won't. And, and then we will be left behind. We will be able to compete with other countries that aren't proceeding with as much caution. So that speaks to an extremely American bias in our need to be number one. And if we don't move aggressively, then someone else might beat us. And I think that that's an argument that just has a lot of sway with a lot of people and is probably going to have a lot of sway in a completely Republican-controlled federal government.
To end this segment, best sighting so far.
Oh, I saw John Kerry today. That was kind of cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
Forgot that guy was alive.
What? John Kerry's still going strong.
Alive and well. So I don't know. Who else have I seen? I'll leave it at John Kerry. There have been some good sightings. There have just been like some just amazing looking people who I don't know who they are. I'm just kind of like dying to know who that person is.
They're rich.
Yeah.
That's all we know.
They just have that, like, I bought this really unique look and, no one else can have it because it costs, an extraordinary amount of money to have. So, no, I actually think there might be a little bit less in terms of at least the kind of like big recognizable business celebrity crowd because of what we talked about earlier, because of a lot of those folks just not coming, for whatever reason, whether it's because they were at the inauguration or just don't feel like going to Davos anymore. Like, I think there's some of that happening. I mean, Davos has been around for a long time, still draws a lot of people, but I don't know that it's the same as it has been in the past as far as just like the sheer number of huge world leaders and the biggest, business figures in the world being here in huge numbers. It doesn't seem like that's as much the case this year. I will say that is anecdotal. I haven't looked at the list of who all's here to test that out, but that's what it seems like to me.
Well, great. Brendan, thank you so much for calling in from Davos. We'll let you go to bed now.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks, guys. All right. Good night.
All right. Bye.
Okay, we're back with David, and it's time to wrap up the show with Keeping Tabs. This is where each one of us shares a story, trend, or piece of pop culture we're following right now. David, what are you keeping tabs on?
Really, all I've been keeping tabs on is having the new Bad Bunny album on repeat, which
Vanessa, our executive producer of video here at Fast Company, we rode the elevator up the other day, and she just turns to me and goes, "The only thing getting me through this winter is Bad Bunny's new album."
It's so true.
Is that good?
It's really good, and I think Vanessa's posted about this a little bit on Instagram, where it's like, it makes you want summer so bad.
Oh, yeah.
It really does. It's like you can see yourself on a beach, sipping a nutcracker, listening to Bad Bunny from like 20 feet away. Someone else is playing Bad Bunny.
It's just ambient background noise.
Yeah, and he's done cool, like, he has done a bunch of shows specifically for Puerto Rican people in Puerto Rico, like restricted access to residents and like locals, and also did a fun thing where he to combat ticket bots, like added a quiz before you could buy tickets. It's like, what is the name of Bad Bunny's new album?
I would fail that. I like Bad Bunny as a person when I see him on awards show, or like he did a Hot Ones interview, and I think he's very charming. I could not name a single Bad Bunny song. I'm sure I've heard many before because they're all over the place. I could not name one. Is that bad?
That's a you problem,
Am
Josh.
I a bad bunny?
What are you keeping tabs on, Josh?
So hard pivot to crypto. I don't know if that relates to Bad Bunny at all in any way. I don't think it does. But I'm keeping tabs on a meme coin trading platform called Pump.fun. Are you familiar with it at all?
Has it always been crypto trading at that domain?
I'm sure it hasn't. But a year ago, the founders of this company got the domain pump.fun from whatever Simi Valley company previously owned it. But it's a meme coin trading platform that has blown up. They've racked up close to $400 million in revenue since launching last January. They basically rack up like 1% of each trade is how they build up revenue, but it's blowing up. Meme coins used to be fairly rare, but they've proliferated a ton. I mean, our president and first lady have shit coins already right now. So I'm baffled as to how this is this popular because there's nothing tied to meme coins. They're just speculative. And they have like, if you go on their site it's like a terrible UI. But their market cap for their top traded coin right now is $1.2 billion. And that coin is called Fart Coin.
Oh my God. I don't know how any of it works. That's my insight. I try not to, I think I maybe made a mistake not paying attention to crypto.
Well, I think that's the problem. I mean, crypto has always been sort of like this silly thing to the side, and then it got kind of serious, and then you had the Sam Bankman-Fried of it all, and all of the collapse of like BlockFi and all of those different crypto trading platforms and the crypto winter that followed. And I feel like no one really takes the meme coin stuff seriously, but if you're raking in $100 million a month, like, we got to start taking this seriously.
Yeah, it's a big part of the economy, which is bizarre because it does nothing for anyone.
It's all speculative. And like I said, the top trading coin on that platform is called Fart Coin. What is happening here?
Yeah, I made my first million in Fart Coin.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. David, thanks for filling in for Yas today.
Of course. I hope she recovers from the woke mind virus very soon.
And that's it for Most Innovative Companies. This episode was produced by Blake Odom. Our editor is Matt Toder. Engineering by Nicholas Torres. Sam Gebauer and Hawa Otori are our associate producers, and Avery Miles is our audience producer. Last and least, MIC's executive producer is me, Josh Christensen. Remember again to subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.